Good evening, everyone. I'm Frank Camacho. We are here this evening to honor a man, a legend, who has fought for civil rights in our community, our state, and our nation for half a century. Dr. Lincole Ragsdale. The name conjures up all kinds of thoughts: business leader, PhD, mortician, activist, crusader, friend, husband, and father. The most meaningful tribute we could pay Lincoln this evening would be to learn from his life experiences, to recognize how far we have come in the issues of civil rights, and to clearly understand why tonight's dinner is so important. He began fighting for civil rights decades ago. One of his greatest challenges became his greatest passion and source of pride. Tuskegee Flying School, a pilot training program for blacks, started in the early 40s in Tuskegee, Alabama.
Tuskegee was where the United States government set up a flying program. It was really an experiment, and it was kind of positioned to fail. They thought that our eyes could not coordinate with our muscles, and they said our brains were like 10 ounces less than a white man's brain. And they believed that. They told people that. So, but I wanted to be a pilot because I wanted to prove something. I had no real desire to fly. The paper said that blacks could not do it. I wanted to prove that we could do it, because we were very segregated. The Army was segregated, the Navy was segregated. We couldn't use any of the facilities. We were treated as second-class citizens, but the only way to change that is to prove that you can do something.
One of Lincoln's buddies from those days was Colonel Lloyd McKeithen.
Lincoln, and Lincoln really generally was, had some vision, had some goal that was probably in his mind all the time. You know, not that he talked about it a lot, but Lincoln was a thinker.
Tuskegee changed my life. It was I'd been told all my life that I was insignificant, I was black, I was dumb, I couldn't do it. At Tuskegee, they told me I could do it. They treated me with respect. And of all the experience I've ever had, I think of all the accolades, they've been an officer and a pilot in the 40s during wartime, and the prestige that went with it changed my whole life. It made me feel as though I could do anything.
He and his bride, Eleanor Dickey Ragsdale, were married in 1949. After their first child was born and a second on the way, Eleanor began house hunting and found the perfect place at 1608 West Thomas, a location that in the early 50s was considered a white neighborhood. Buying it was tricky. Lincoln got his only look at it before the sale by peering over the back fence at night. A white family friend bought it for them and signed it over to them in the closing process. Neighbors quickly presented them with petitions encouraging them to move.
They said, we know you can't be happy here. You don't want to live among these white folks. You want to go back among your people. And we are willing to give you the money you put into the house plus the moving fee. And they wrote on the front of our garage doors, nigger. So we let it stay there about 2 months because we want to be sure they knew where the niggers lived. And we didn't have a problem with that. Well, the neighbors had to come and repaint it. I wasn't going to paint the name off the door. I thought it was a situation that we should leave it there.
And what finally happened to that family next door that had initiated those petitions? Lincoln's youngest daughter, Emily, remembers well.
Later, I ended up babysitting for her grandchild, and they treated us very nice. And there was love there. Easy to hate people when you aren't around them. But when you break the segregation, people tend to accept you. Usually, not always.
Emily told us about her dad.
And he'd encourage all of us to dress always our best, because he knew that we were overcoming so much more, and people would judge you by the way you dress. When I would get ready in the morning, when he was around, he would sometimes sing around the house, and almost like a preacher mode, saying how God's going to give him the strength, it's going to be all right now. And now looking back, I realized that he was inspiring himself, pumping himself up to give him the strength to go out to fight another day battle on the battle line. He'd encourage us kids to stick together, because he would say that it was easier to break one stick than several sticks together. So I think he knew that people would try to hurt us to try to get to him. That was always in the back of his mind.
Lincoln and Eleanor were in the thick of things when blacks in Phoenix were responding to the effects of Watts.
During the riots, I remember my brothers and sisters, we were at the home on Thomas Road, and my parents weren't there. They were out playing their part, making a difference. And I knew there was a list with my father's name on it, that he was in danger. But that was just the part that he played. We didn't dwell on that. We didn't dwell on the fact that he may not come home one night.
While his children were growing up, Lincoln was busy being husband, dad, businessman, and civil rights activist. He was instrumental in integrating businesses in Phoenix. As he explained, in those days to work in civil rights,
You either had to be a preacher who had a church, or you had to be an independent business person that didn't depend on the white community. And you had to be able to be free to go in the middle of the day. So it was the preachers and the undertakers who had the time to take off, and I was the undertaker at the time. And you had the preachers, and we would take off the time to do it. Someone had to do the job. No one could do your job for you but yourself.
in those days, one of Lincoln's closest friends was the Reverend George Brooks.
Reverend Brooks was one of the real pioneers. I was the arrogant one, and Reverend Brooks was the one to console and work with the people. My job was going to shake up the water. His job was come along and say, well, he's a little bit too far out.
Lincoln did well, and he did well in spite of the fact that he placed himself on the line. Because, you see, I didn't owe the white people of this community money. I was just a Presbyterian preacher. Lincoln was a businessman who had a great deal at stake. I had nothing. My congregation paid my salary. These were black people. Lincoln had to borrow money to maintain his business, to keep capital flowing. I didn't. But nevertheless, he placed himself on the line. And for that, I owe him a great deal of gratitude, and of course, the community owes him a great deal of respect.
I like to hear about the Lincoln who came here 40 years ago or more, because that's the radical Lincoln. That's not the Mercedes driving, you know, suave, debonair Lincoln. That's the guy who used to cause trouble on behalf of equal rights and civil rights. And I like to hear him talk about when they boycotted or sat in front of the Woolworths department store that didn't serve blacks at that time because of their color. And he talks about how he was, you know, how he led the civil rights movement in Arizona.
You can't predict what he's going to do, always. You cannot judge what he may do either. He's going to do it, and he doesn't care how you feel about it if he thinks it's right. He never does what I call the popular issues. He will take on unpopular causes, but he will also make you think.
He's a vital figure in this community. His prestige, his sincerity, his devotion make him the kind of guy that you really like to know, because he makes things happen.
Both white and African Americans, Native Americans, Hispanics, Jews, that this community owes Lincole Ragsdale a debt of gratitude that we do not have enough time to pay. He made Phoenix an all-American city. He made Phoenix an inclusive city, because without him, Phoenix might still be on its way.
Those who know Lincoln the best know that he's only part of the team.
He loves my mother dearly and cherishes her and wants her to have the best, because I feel as though she has been a pillar of strength, silently standing there beside him, and he loves her dearly. And I just can't imagine one without the other.
She's been my friend, she's been my companion, she's been my wife, the mother of the children. Really, she had more guts about these things than I have ever had.
And given the opportunity to change anything, what might Lincoln's best friend want to change?
I would have liked that we would not have had to do that at all. I would like to have thought that because we were born in America, and we were trying to be upright citizens, that we should not have had to go through that kind of struggle. But certainly I would not have changed the fact that we were involved in it. I think that was very important at the time, and you have to live in the time in which you're born, and you have to deal with the challenges that you meet at the time you're alive. And then you look back and you have to be proud that you could be a part of it, and that you had enough strength, courage, and faith to have done it.
Lincoln and Eleanor, Emily, Elizabeth, Gwen, and Lincoln Jr., thank you for having the strength and courage and faith to have done it.